You want answers?
I'm as mad as hell, and I'm not going to take this anymore.
You want answers?
You have offended my family.
I think I'm entitled. You want answers? I want the truth.
And you have offended a Shaolin temple.
You can't handle the truth.
Surely you can't be serious.
I am serious. And don't call me Shirley.
Radical Rant.
Welcome back, everybody, live from Bright Side here in 1010 Southeast Powell. And, you know, I wrote this piece for High Times, and some of you know that I picked up a gig writing a daily article for High Times. Sometimes it appears in the news section if I'm covering a news story. Sometimes it's in the 101 section if I'm just covering a general interest article. And today, one of my articles got published that's entitled, and this is what High Times title. By the way, folks, sometimes I'll supply a title to them and they'll change the title. So it's not always up to me, the title. But the title they put in High Times today was 5 Pro-Pot Myths That Must Be Busted. And they put a picture of Jamie and what's his name, the Mythbusters, to go along with it. And, you know, I've been writing these articles for a while now, just about a month, and none has received as many comments as this one has. And some of them pretty critical comments. So this is what happens when you cast a critical eye at the marijuana movement sometimes. You know, we're so busy oftentimes debunking the nonsense that we get out of the other side, out of the opposition, that we fail to debunk some of the stuff that our side says. And that's what I wanted to do with this article. And I wrote, here at High Times, we want marijuana legalization more than just about anyone. We also know the cannabis plant is a remarkable species that is so beneficial to mankind in so many ways it's hard to count. But even though we know there have been conspiracies and lies designed to keep marijuana illegal, we do ourselves no favors by spreading our own conspiracies and untruths. In order to maintain our credibility, reformers ought to start debunking some of these cherished pro-pot myths. And so here's the 5 pro-pot myths that I put forth that got a lot of rebuttal from people. Number 1, debunked presidential quotes. Thomas Jefferson was not toking hemp on his back veranda. Abraham Lincoln wasn't smoking weed on the porch playing his Hohner harmonica. And Abraham Lincoln never declared prohibition will work great injury to the cause of temperance. These quotes have long been debunked, no matter what the totally baked DVD says. Now, the founding fathers' hemp quotes, though, those are totally legit. So that was the number 1 thing I came back, and a lot of people responded to that one. Basically, let's see if I can find this one. Great job on debunking High Times as a source for honest information. Thanks to your little article, including the insult to me, and, you know, blah, 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 blah. So there wants no proof on this kind of stuff. And one of the people came back with all these quotes. Here we go. Brian Gilmore responded. Both Washington and Jefferson tried growing hemp on their Virginia farms with mixed success. Washington used some of what he grew to make hemp clothing, blah, 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 blah. Not only were Washington and Jefferson marijuana farmers, they were unsuccessful marijuana farmers. Okay, this is where people get confused, is like, if we were talking about a preponderance of the evidence as to whether or not Jefferson and Washington and Ben Franklin ever smoked cannabis for the purpose of getting euphoric, maybe you could try to make that case. But the problem is we've got plenty of proof that they grew hemp. And we've got Washington's diaries that said that he separated the male plants from the female plants. One of the reasons you might do that is to get females for smoking. But the other reason you might do that is to get males for seed or for hemp. So there's a lot of variation on that. And the scholars, or the people that are in charge of the Washington Museum, George Washington's effects, won't let anyone test his pipes to find out if he had any blends. And there's reports of Jefferson and Washington exchanging smoking blends, different herbal blends. But to say that there's any definitive proof that they consumed cannabis, it's just not there in the way that we talk about smoking pot. Now, if you want to talk about presidents that smoke pot, Benjamin Pierce, we have Zachary Taylor, James Monroe, Andrew Jackson. They all smoked pot. We got Monroe from his time in France when he was working out. I think he was an ambassador to France at one point. But anyway, he used hashish out there. The other three, Taylor and Jackson and Pierce, we have from their letters that they wrote back during the Mexican Wars, where they were serving in the military at that time, and they used to smoke marijuana with their soldiers. In fact, Franklin Pierce once wrote that the marijuana was the only good thing about the war. And we also have biographies of John F. Kennedy that allude to his, or actually directly talk about his smoking joints for back pain. And of course, Clinton and Obama and George W. Bush admitted their pot smoking. But as far as those debunked presidential quotes, the Hohner harmonica, the prohibition one out of Lincoln, those are debunked. Please stop spreading them. Now, the number 2 thing that I added in my top 5 pro-pot myths that must be busted was hemp will save the world. Hear this one all the time. Hemp will save the planet. Yes. Hemp is an amazingly versatile plant for food, fuel, fiber, and medicine. But 31 countries already grow hemp. China grows hemp, right? It's just the United States banning it that dooms the earth. There's a lot of things that cause a lot of environmental degradation. When there's a hemp iPhone, hemp diamonds, and hemp cheeseburgers, then maybe hemp will replace everything that damages the environment. Now, I didn't get a lot of pushback from this, but a lot of people wanted to point out all the great things hemp will do and how hemp can be used as biodiesel, which is absolutely true. Problem is, you have to drive a diesel to use biodiesel. Sure, replacing all of our fleets of 18-wheelers and converting them to use biodiesel would do enormous good for the planet. But until everybody buys a diesel car, we're still going to have gasoline cars running around. So hemp is going to help a lot, but hemp will save the world is not just a little hyperbolic. Now, the third one, the third one is the one, as I was writing it, I knew people would go up in arms about this, and there'd be wailing and gnashing of teeth and hair on fire. And that is the pro-pot myth that cannabis cures cancer. Hear this all the time. Cannabis cures cancer. Now, look, folks, we've seen THC kill cancer cells in petri dishes. And many people will tell you that hemp oil cured their cancer. But all of those terms, cannabis cures cancer, all three of those words are much broader than what we can actually prove and what we actually know. First of all, cancer is a very broad spectrum of diseases. There's lots of different cancers in lots of different stages. And cure is an absolute kind of a term. Cure means here's something that's ailing you, and I'll give you this, and you will be miraculously healed permanently. For someone to be considered cured of cancer, it needs to be in remission for 5 years. And we just don't have people using the hemp oil long enough to verify that in a scientific way. Now, this is where people get mad because, oh, my cousin or my aunt or my brother or me, I used cannabis oil on my skin cancer, or I used cannabis oil or whatever. You know, our own brave Michaela used cannabis oil and her leukemia is in remission. But we don't have the double-blind, peer-reviewed, proof research to say cannabis cures cancer. And especially as cancer, like I said, is such a broad thing. I mean, if cannabis actually cured cancer, guaranteed 100%, then Michelle Rainey would still be alive. Our own Steve Veteran would still be alive. A lot of people who used cannabis oil to treat their cancer are dead now. Now, if we want to say cannabis kills cancer cells, that's accurate. If we want to say cannabis holds the promise to beneficial cancer therapies, that we can say. Even we can say many people have used cannabis oil and believe it has helped their cancer or cured their cancer. That's toe on the line, but it's still accurate. But to say as a blanket statement, cannabis cures cancer is as irresponsible as saying comedy cures depression. Now, yeah, laughter is good medicine. I can show you all sorts of studies that show people that are exposed to comedy, that are in a depressive state, will raise their mood, will lead to better outcomes. We can show you all that data. But it'd be irresponsible as hell for me to turn to a person who's clinically manic depressed and say, oh, all you need to do is go to the Chuckle Hut, and tell them to ignore all the conventional talk therapies, psychotherapies, maybe even psychiatric drugs that could really and have been proven to help her. That's not to say I wouldn't tell her to go to the Chuckle Hut. It will definitely help her depression. It'll definitely help her feel better. Sure. Just as cancer, I would tell people, use cannabis oil. Absolutely use the cannabis oil. There's so much good it can do and so little harm it can cause. But to make a blanket statement that cannabis cures cancer, and then to have people thinking all they need to do is take some oil and not see a doctor and not use the conventional chemotherapies or the conventional drugs that are out there, that just sounds a little too dangerous to me, and something that we're just not yet ready to say. If we're going to bring, and Clint Werner, the author of Marijuana Gateway to Health, chimed in on the comments, and basically with the point that if we're reaching out to the medical professionals we need, we can't come at them with outlandish claims like cures. That sets off a thing in the doctor's head that says quack, that says snake oil. We need to show the promises there. We need to show the research must be done. Absolutely. But let's do so accurately, and let's do so without exaggerating what cannabis is and isn't capable of at this point. All right. Now, the number 4 item that I added in the top 5 pro-pot myths that must die. Legalization will save money in law enforcement. Now, it's going to get me some angry people as well, but this is a stat where, and the way that's usually calculated, and I've done this. I've been as guilty as using this stat before, but the way that it works is it calculates, okay, how much money do we spend on cops and prisons and courts and so on? And then what percentage of arrests and prisoners and such are there for marijuana? And then divide the former by the latter, right? Like, okay, so we spend X million dollars, divide by what percent of pot stuff is in there, and then that's how much it costs. Well, that's a very simplistic formula. It doesn't take into account a lot of things. Number one, police departments and bureaucracies don't spend their money on a item by item basis. It's not like they assigned cops and they say, all right, I want you to spend 2 hours arresting people for pot today. If the cop is no longer allowed to arrest people for pot, it's not like he's taking that 2 hours off every day and not getting paid for that 2 hours. That cop still is going to be working. Now, yes, he'll be catching people committing real crimes, and that's certainly something to be applauded, but we still have to pay his salary. And if we assume that rather than catching people that are, with a bag of weed, he's then catching real criminals, well, then all those expenses we allegedly saved from housing the criminal who was the pothead are now going to be spent housing the real criminal, right? There will be some savings. There will be reductions in prison costs. There will be reductions maybe in even the staffing that is necessary at a police department. But trying to come up with some hard and fast figure that marijuana is going to save this month this much, to me, is almost always overinflated. Now, the music kicking in here as we get toward the end of the show. Number 5, and I hope you guys can hear me over this. The pop myth must die.
So your rock don't roll. If you ain't got soul, so your rock don't roll. If you ain't got soul, so your rock don't roll. If you ain't got soul, so your rock don't roll.
So there you have it. That's my top 5 pro-pop myths. Caused a little bit of controversy today. Check that out at hightimes.com. Also, High Times has given me permission to reprint my articles at radicalruts.com with a 1-week delay. Find unplaced articles. Check it out. Art intro part. Check it out. Hi, It's I'm Radical Russ, Wiz Cleveland.
This is the Russ Belville Show. The Russ Belville Show is blogging and podcasting daily at RadicalRuss.com.
Take a seed, you plant it, you grow it, you dry it, you roll it, you smoke it. You take a seed, you plant it, you grow it, you dry it, you roll it, you smoke it. You take a seed, you plant it, you grow it, you dry it, you roll it, you smoke it, and it goes down super fun.